wind howled against the windows as Dr. Eliza Vance packed her last suitcase. It was strange, she thought, how life always seemed to circle back to the places you'd buried the deepest. For her, it was Hollow Glen. She hadn't thought about that godforsaken place in nearly 20 years. Not since the fire, not since the screaming. But then the letter came. It wasn't dated. The handwriting was almost painfully familiar, crooked, like someone had tried to mimic her brother Daniel's cursive. But Daniel had died in the fire. That was certain. She had seen his silhouette engulfed in flames through the broken attic window as she ran. Yet, the letter sat in her trembling hands. Eliza, you need to come back. They're still here. They never left. And I can't hold them off much longer. D. No address. No return name. Just a postmark from Wheeling, West Virginia, and an unmistakable scent of coal dust clinging to the paper. She thought about tossing it, about telling herself it was a cruel prank. But it wasn't just a letter. The dreams had started again, in them. She stood before the blackened remains of their childhood home, the old Vance house at the end of Sparrow Lane. The porch sagged like a dying man's chest, and a low whisper called from within the cracked walls. Always the same word, come. So she booked the train, packed a few essentials, and didn't tell anyone where she was going. After all, who would believe her? A Harvard-trained psychologist investigating ghost letters from a dead brother. She'd be laughed out of her career. Train rattled through the hills of Pennsylvania and West Virginia, drawing closer to the Appalachian wilderness that had once been her entire world. The mountains stood like silent judges in the mist, watching her return. By the time she reached the derelict station at Barrows, and the closest stop to Hollow Glen, the sun was already setting. A single cab driver sat in an old Crown Vic, reading a Bible. When she approached, he rolled down his window and looked her over with wary eyes. You sure about Hollow Glen? He asked. Eliza nodded. I'm meeting someone there. The man sucked his teeth. Ain't nobody in Hollow Glen, miss. Not anymore. Not since the mine collapsed. I know. Just drop me off at the old post office. I'll walk from there. He hesitated, but finally unlocked the back door. Your business, he muttered, as if to absolve himself of responsibility. The ride was quiet, save for the occasional caw of crows and the static hum of AM radio as they twisted along mountain roads. Eliza spotted things she hadn't seen in decades. Rusted mining carts overgrown with vines, the broken sign to Whitmore's General Store, and finally, the cracked stone arch reading, Welcome to Hollow Glen, EST, 1891. The cab stopped abruptly. This is as far as I go. She paid him, slung her bag over her shoulder, and stood before the hollow remnants of a town long forgotten by the world. Silence ruled here, heavy and oppressive. The post office was just as she remembered it, boarded windows, paint peeling like sunburnt skin, and a warped wooden bench where she and Daniel used to sit waiting for their father. A strange sound echoed down the street, not quite wind, not quite a voice. It almost sounded like laughter. Eliza's breath quickened. She turned toward Vance house, still visible at the far end of the block. And then she saw it. A figure slight, hunched, and barefoot, stepped into the road from behind a collapsed storefront. It wore what looked like a tattered coat and dragged something behind it. A doll, a bundle. It stopped halfway across the street and turned its head toward her. The face was obscured by shadow, but the head cocked in a way that triggered something deep in her limbic brain, the place where fight or flight lives. She blinked, and the figure was gone. She didn't run. Instead, she made her way toward the Vance house, following the cracked sidewalk past the remains of Hollow Glen's small chapel and the toppled bell that had once rung for miners changing shifts. The house still stood, barely. The fire had gutted it, but the bones remained. Blackened timber, melted fixtures. A ghostly echo of family photos once hung on walls now scorched and hollow. She stood at the front door, hesitating. The doorknob was cold, too cold for summer. As she turned it, the door groaned open with the sound of wood weeping. Inside, dust motes danced in the last light of day, and the smell of ash, mildew, and something metallic invaded her senses. Her steps were tentative. She passed the spot where her mother's rocking chair used to be. The floor creaked beneath her, and the walls seemed to pulse with memory. She paused at the staircase, the one Daniel had fallen down when they were 10. She'd never forget the way he bled, how he'd said someone pushed him, even though they were alone. Eliza, her name was whispered. It wasn't from outside. It wasn't in her head. It was upstairs. She drew a breath and ascended. Each step groaned under her weight, like the house resented her return. At the top, the hallway stretched before her like a tunnel into the past. Her old room was to the left. Daniel's was to the right. She stepped into his room. Everything was just as she remembered. The wallpaper was spaceships, the broken toy chest, the cracked mirror, and in the corner, the attic door, the one she'd seen engulfed in flame all those years ago. Except now, it was slightly ajar. She approached. Every cell in her body screamed not to, but her hand moved before her mind could object. She pulled the door open. Blackness stared back, then footsteps, not hers. From behind, she turned nothing. She turned back and saw Daniel, 10 years old, face unburnt, eyes wide and terrified. "Eliza," he whispered. "They're coming. Don't listen to them." Before she could speak, he was gone, evaporated, like mist, and the whisper came again, deeper now, echoing from the walls, from the floor, from inside her skull. "Welcome home." Eliza couldn't move. Her hand trembled on the attic doorknob, and her breath came in shallow bursts, as if the air itself had turned viscous. Her brother's voice still rang in her head, not as memory, but as something present, imprinted in her marrow. She stood for several minutes in that paralyzed state, half waiting for something else to crawl out of the dark, but nothing did. The attic remained a void, deep and silent. She slowly shut the door, descending the stairs. Eliza's legs ached as if she had hiked miles. The sensation of being watched hadn't left her. The house, no, the entire town seemed to breathe around her, each plank and wall expanding and contracting with some unearthly rhythm. She stumbled into what was once the kitchen. The old cast-iron stove, now rusted, loomed like a relic from a lost civilization. The cabinets were either ripped off or hanging open like broken jaws. A thin layer of soot clung to everything. Then she heard the sound, a knocking, 3 slow taps from below, the basement. That was where her father used to keep his maps, old geological blueprints of the mines. After the fire, no one had bothered with the basement. The floor had partially collapsed, and they had said it was too dangerous to enter. The knocking came again, louder. She found a flashlight in her bag and clicked it on. The stairs to the basement creaked as she descended. The beam of light illuminated. More than dust, it revealed scratches on the walls, hundreds of them, tiny, clawed marks, all dragging upward, as if something had tried to climb out. "Eliza," the whisper again. She stopped midway, then silence. She reached the bottom. The cement floor was cracked and slick with mildew. Shelves had collapsed in on themselves. Mold bloomed in the corners like black flowers. The knocking had stopped. She turned toward the old workbench. Her father's mining helmet still lay there, encrusted with dust. Next to it sat a folder, clean, untouched by time. She opened it. Inside were photographs, old ones, black and white, all of the mine. Hollow Glen's original shaft, the spiral tunnel, the elevator, the foreman's office. But there was one photo out of place. It was in color, dated 3 months ago. A photograph of her standing in front of her Boston apartment, holding groceries, looking confused, written in red marker on the back, "You've been chosen, come home." She dropped the photo and backed away, heart slamming. Something scraped behind her. She turned. A figure stood at the far end of the basement, tall, featureless, wrapped in burlap, head tilted like a question mark. Its arms were long, too long, fingers dragging on the floor. The flashlight flickered. She didn't wait. She ran up the stairs, nearly breaking her ankle on the top step as the door slammed shut behind her on its own. Her scream echoed through the ruined house, but there was no one to hear it. Outside, the sky had darkened to an unnatural shade of indigo. The street was choked with fog. She stepped out and started walking toward the chapel. It was the only place she could think to go, a symbol of sanctuary, however broken. As she passed the old general store, she heard voices, multiple, overlapping, whispering in cadence. They were saying a name, Vance, Vance, Vance. Inside the chapel, pews were overturned and the altar was caved in, but the stained glass, shattered and scorched, still glowed faintly in the moonlight. She knelt beside what remained of the pulpit, a movement above. She looked up and gasped. The figure from the basement stood in the rafters, hunched and watching. Eliza. Voice was everywhere. She ran again, this time blindly, through alleys and collapsed alleyways until she found herself standing before the mouth of the mine, the one her father had sworn he'd sealed forever after the collapse. But now, it was open. No barricade, no chain, just darkness yawning into the earth like a hungry throat. And above the entrance, someone had carved, "They never left. You did." Eliza turned to run, but she wasn't alone. At least a dozen figures surrounded her now, emerging from the fog like dreams turned wrong. Children with empty sockets, miners with no jaws, a woman with burnt skin cradling a bundle of bone. They stared at her with expectation, and one by one, they pointed toward the mine. From the shadows, another form stepped forward, her brother now, a man, or what should have been him. His eyes were pale and glowing faintly. His mouth was trembling. "I couldn't stop them," he said. "They feed on the forgotten, and you forgot. You all did." Tears streamed down Eliza's cheeks. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know it was real. It doesn't matter now." Then, a scream from inside the mine. A woman's scream. Her mother's. Eliza fell to her knees, hands over ears. "I buried this place," she shouted. "I left it behind." Daniel crouched beside her. "But it didn't leave you." And with that, the earth shook up. From the mouth of the mine came a gale of air, as cold as the grave, and smelling of sulfur and blood. The figures around her knelt. The mine was breathing, and it wanted her. Eliza had always hated caves. It wasn't just the darkness. It was the weight, the sensation that millions of tons of stone pressed above you, just waiting to collapse and seal you in forever. But now, she stood at the mouth of one such cave, and it wasn't the weight of the stone that threatened to crush her. It was the memory. The mine yawned before her, the breath of the mountain whispering out in short, unnatural gusts. The ground beneath her feet pulsed faintly, as though the mine had a heartbeat. Daniel reached for her hand. She didn't resist. It was warm, real. She looked into his eyes, searching for something of the boy she'd once known. "They want you to see," he said. "See what? What we became." He led her forward. The others, the shadowy figures, the faceless watchers stood back, their heads bowed. It felt like a ceremony, a sacrament, and she was the offering. Inside the mine, the darkness swallowed the light. Her flashlight flickered and then died altogether. But Daniel's hand never let go. The descent was long and steep. The wooden support. Beams creaked like weary bones. Carved into the walls were more symbols, strange spirals, handprints, and a script she couldn't recognize. At times it felt as though the rock itself was whispering, "Eliza, come deeper. I don't understand," she said aloud. "Why me? Why now?" Daniel didn't answer. They reached a large chamber, The spiral room. She remembered this place from her father's maps. It was where the miners had first struck a strange vein, not of coal, but something older, something they hadn't been able to explain. They'd called it black silver, and then they sealed it up. But the seal was broken. Veins of the metallic substance ran like veins through the walls, pulsing faintly with light. It moved like mercury in tiny rivulets, feeding something deeper within. At the center of the chamber stood a statue. No, not a statue. A figure, encased in stone. It was a woman, bent backward, screaming. "Eliza," Daniel said softly. "Do you remember Amelia Cho?" Eliza's breath hitched. She did. Amelia had been a girl in their neighborhood, 1 year younger, bright, full of questions. And then one day, she vanished. The adults said she'd moved away, but Eliza remembered. The last time she saw her near the mine, crying. "This is where she died?" Eliza asked. "No," Daniel said. "This is where she was made." The figure in stone twitched. Eliza screamed and stumbled back. The veins in the wall pulsed harder. The statue cracked just slightly, and from the crack, something black and oily dripped. "We aren't the only ones here," Daniel said. "Eliza." The voice came from inside her own head. "Eliza, help me. Amelia." She turned to Daniel. "What's happening?" He looked older now, worn, haunted. The mine woke something that was never meant to be found. When the old tunnel collapsed, they thought it was a cabin, but it was the mountain rejecting us, vomiting us out. "We didn't listen. We're all supposed to die," Eliza whispered. Daniel nodded. "We did, but it doesn't end here." Suddenly, the wall to the left shuddered. A section peeled back like skin. Beyond it, a narrow tunnel sloped downward, its walls lined with handprints. Hundreds of them, etched in soot. She knew she had no choice. They walked. The tunnel narrowed until they had to crawl. The air was thick with moisture and rot. The silence was absolute. Even Daniel's breathing vanished. She emerged into another chamber, impossibly vast, larger than any she'd imagined could exist underground. At its center was a pit, and from the pit rose a heart. Not a human heart. Something older, titanic, beating slowly, covered in black silver, pumping it like blood through the walls of the earth. "Eliza," the mine whispered. "Eliza." She dropped to her knees, overwhelmed. In her mind, she saw it all. The first miners, breaking through into this place. The thing they awakened. The town slowly warping. Dreams becoming real. Reality fraying. The fire, not an accident, but a desperate attempt to purge the infection. Her father, trying to stop it, but too late. They'd fed it. With memory, with fear, with pain. It grew stronger with every forgotten name. "Eliza," Daniel said softly, crouching beside her. "It feeds on what we abandon, and you abandoned us." She sobbed. "I was a child. You still are." The heart pulsed, and the chamber lit with GHOSTLIGHT. Figures rose from the edges. All the town's dead. The miners, Amelia, her mother, even her father, all of them whispering her name. "You have to make a choice," Daniel said. "Join us, or seal it forever." "How?" "You remember the nursery rhyme?" She did. They used to sing it while skipping rope, down in the mine, where the shadows hum. "Don't wake the heart, or you'll come undone. But if you see the silver bleed, say the words and plant the seed." Plant the seed. She reached into her bag. Inside, though she didn't remember packing it, was a small pouch of salt. Her mother used to keep it by the door. To keep the dead from walking in, she'd said, and nestled beside it. A seed, not of any plant she recognized. Pale, glassy, and warm to the touch. "Say the words," Daniel whispered. Eliza stood. The ground trembled. She stepped to the edge of the pit, raised the seed high, and spoke. "From dust to dust, I give you rest. No more pain, no more test. Sleep now, deep beneath this land, forgotten not by heart or hand. She dropped the seed into the heart. A scream erupted, deafening, cosmic, filled with rage and sorrow and every unspoken grief of 1,000 years. The heart cracked. The chamber began to collapse. Eliza, Daniel shouted. She turned. He was fading. So were the others. Go, he screamed. You've done enough. And then darkness. Eliza awoke in the middle of Sparrow Lane. It was daytime again, bright, clear, and impossibly normal. The Vance house was whole. The general store was intact. Even the bell in the chapel's steeple shone with polished brass. Children laughed in the distance. Birds sang. For a moment, she thought it was a dream, a flashback, a hallucination. But then she saw her own hands, scraped, blistered, and blackened by soot. It had happened. The mine, the seed, the heart. Daniel, she turned in slow circles, confusion taking root. The air smelled of honeysuckle and fresh bread, not sulfur or death. The people of Hollow Glen walked the streets, smiling, waving. Her mother stood outside the house, hanging clothes on a line. Her father passed by with his old lunch pail, nodding toward her. Eliza, he said with a grin. You're going to be late for school. Her blood froze. It wasn't real. None of it was. This was a trap, a construct created by the mine, or whatever lived within it, some final defense to seduce her into forgetting, into staying, into feeding it again. No, she whispered. I ended this. But the town shimmered with the perfection of a memory unspoiled by time. It was warm, comforting, wrong. From behind her came a voice. Welcome back, Eliza. It was Amelia Cho, unchanged. 11 years old, bright eyes, a missing tooth. She smiled. You fixed everything. No, Eliza said, backing away. You're not real. Amelia tilted her head. Isn't this better than what came before? No screaming, no fire, no fear, just Hollow Glen, the way it was. It was never perfect. It was yours, and that was the key. This wasn't a memory. It was bait, personalized. The mine had turned her own longing into a cage. She ran down Sparrow Lane, past the barber shop, past the old coal museum. The people turned to watch her, all smiling, all waving. Eliza, Eliza. She stopped only when she reached the edge of town, where the forest began, except now, instead of trees, there was only blackness. A void that pulsed like an ocean held behind glass. The world flickered. Her shoes turned to soot. The buildings wavered. Eliza, a voice said from the void. You could stay. Daniel stepped forward, but this wasn't her brother. His smile was off. Too wide, too white. His eyes were mirrors. You did well, he said, but you were always meant to return. Just like the others. No one truly escapes what they bury. I planted the seed. The false Daniel chuckled. In the heart, yes, but the root is here. He pointed to her chest. Eliza staggered back. No, you brought the seed, he continued, but you carried the soil. You nourished it with guilt. You came back of your own will. She clutched her head. The world distorted. The houses melted like wax. The sky burned red. The people turned to ash. She was falling, screaming. She landed in water, cold, dark. She flailed and surfaced, gasping. Around her was a black lake, silent and endless. No shore, no sky, just fog. Eliza, came a voice. A woman's. She turned. A figure floated above the water, tall, cloaked in shadow, her face made of shifting masks. One moment her mother, the next a miner, the next Amelia. I am the forgotten, it said. I am every child buried, every name unmarked, every scream that echoed unanswered, and I live because of you. Eliza's teeth chattered. I didn't know. I was only a child. Yet you remembered. You carried us with you. That makes you more than just a child. It makes you a witness. What do you want, eh? Choice. The lake churned. Shapes rose beneath the surface, figures writhing just below, pale faces and open mouths. You can sink, or you can carry us forward. Keep the names alive. Burn the silence. Hold the truth in your bones. What happens if I choose to carry you? You leave. But never forget, you become the lantern, the curse bearer, the storyteller, and if I sink, you join the forgotten. No pain, no memory, only stillness. Eliza wept. I miss my brother, she whispered. The shape shifted, became Daniel. He never left you, it said in his voice. But you have to leave him. Let him go. She closed her eyes, then reached into her chest. There, buried deep, was the last ember of the mine. The root. It pulsed with black light, bound by guilt and fear. She pulled, screamed, ripped it out. The lake erupted, the sky cracked. Light, not natural, not earthly, exploded from her palm, and the voices cried out, not in pain, in release. One by one, the faces in the lake faded, one by one. The masks fell from the shadow woman's face, and the water stilled. Eliza awoke in a hospital. Bathed. Boston General. The window was open. Morning light bathed her in warmth. A nurse walked in, startled. You're awake? My God. We thought. How long was I out? Eliza croaked. 5 days. You were found unconscious near the Old Glen trailhead. Hikers called it in. Dehydrated. Malnourished. No ID. She sat up slowly. Everything hurt. Later in the mirror, she saw something behind her eyes. Something older. A weight she could never fully shed, but also something new. Resolve. That night, she opened her laptop, created a document. And began to write. My name is Dr. Eliza Vance, and this is the true history of Hollow Glen. Eliza wrote. For days, she barely ate. She barely slept. She sat in her Boston apartment, lights off, curtains drawn, tapping feverishly on her laptop, pouring every memory, every hallucination, every haunted image into the screen. By the end of the first week, she had over 300 pages of raw recollections, dreams, whispers, and histories that no one else had ever written down. She was documenting a town that no longer existed, or perhaps one that never really did. She was preserving the names of children who had no graves, families who had burned in fires that never made the news, and tunnels that twisted reality beneath West Virginia's skin. And yet, it still wasn't enough. Every night when she tried to sleep, the whispers returned.